Heyo everyone, and welcome back to the channel. I've been aware of Final Fantasy XIV for some time now, as many of you have if you've been in the MMO community for even a second, and I've tried Final Fantasy XIV twice before on 2 different accounts. This time, and on my 3rd account, I feel as if I've finally hit my stride, and I've been really enjoying Final Fantasy XIV, and even in its earlier phases. So, let me go through my experiences while playing the early game of Final Fantasy XIV as a conjurer, soon to be white mage, and give you my 3rd impressions of the game. It's been some time, but 3rd time's a charm, I guess. So, let's go! After creating your character and picking an early class to play, you'll be sent out into the world of Eorzea. From my perspective, I chose a conjurer, so I was sent to Gridania. Making my 3rd entrance into this world, I've become quite used to the area of Gridania and the maps outside of the main city where you do most of your fighting and leveling. I must say that I surely love my forest biomes, but playing through this area for the 3rd time has made me realize that some of the color palettes used in Gridania come off just a little drab, and I honestly thought this probably in my 1st account and 1st time playing through, but I thought it's something to mention. Now, as for the movement, it's like a basic MMO. If you're using a mouse and keyboard, you will use your W, A, and D keys and your left and right mouse click to navigate the area. But you can also choose to play with a console controller, but you know, I don't have one, so I don't really have experience, so I'm gonna leave that for my console players to talk about in the comments or make other videos on. But one thing I will say that's quite interesting about the movement is that they give you a sprint action right out of the gate, and most MMOs just kind of force you to go at this fairly slow and mundane speed of just a light jog, but this sprint can actually come in handy, and you know, you'll learn to value it some more. Now, another thing to note for the movement is the teleportation system. You can hook your person up into the Aethernet crystal around your very first town. Similar to other teleportation mechanics in other games, you can teleport to this point anywhere in the world. And as you venture out into other cities and towns, you can attune there and make it your main point of teleportation if you so desire. In addition to that, you don't even need to use this as a skill. You can just open your map and then freely select a location and teleport there for some money. It's really, really useful. You get one free one with your return skill and any others for some gil. Playing as a conjurer, I have already set myself up to have a combat style that is slower than other jobs or classes. But as a general disclaimer, which is echoed by a lot of the community, the combat in Final Fantasy XIV is much slower at the early game due to the lengthy global cooldowns that you have to deal with. You only have a couple skills when you are first introduced into the game, and all of those skills will most likely be on the general 2.5 second global cooldown, or is it even a 3-second cooldown? I'm not entirely sure, but it's definitely noticeable from other games that I've played. However, I will say that with it being my 3rd time, you learn to just kind of expect it. And at first it seems like an issue, but the more you play it, the more you just generally become a part of the combat system. And it has its own unique flows to it once you get to greater levels. This is where your non-global cooldown skills come into play. I remember playing my white mage on my 2nd account, which I got to a decently high level, and I had a couple non-global cooldown skills. And it's in these instances where you can begin to weave your cooldown skills with your non-global cooldown skills and kind of fit the scenario that you are in. Now, this is from a healer's perspective. I don't have a lot of knowledge on a tanking perspective. I have a little bit of knowledge in terms of DPS, but a lot of these things about combat can vary between classes. I just think that I probably played it from one of the slower perspectives. In addition to this, the combat system is structured into the standard Holy Trinity system, which I actually really love, and I hope that as a community we're kind of going away from that. Like, there's no Holy Trinity, like we don't need it. And I've played games where they've tried to do that and it just doesn't feel great. So I was very grateful to experience yet another Holy Trinity system in Final Fantasy XIV, where it works very well. You have your tanks, you have your damage, and you have your healers. It's all a wonderful mix, and you just work together to complete your goals. Questing. Questing will be your main avenue to leveling. There are options where you can just grind out mobs, kill a number or an X number amount of them to gain experience out in the open world. You could also do fates, which are more group content. However, the most standard and marketable area for questing to the general public come in the form of quests. They're really quite normal. They're much like standard quests that you'd find in any other MMO, such as World of Warcraft, somewhat in Guild Wars 2, because Guild Wars 2 kind of has questing areas, Rift, Terra, yada yada yada. You guys got it. However, I will say, on my third time playing through, I noticed a much faster leveling process. I hit level, I think like 20, 25 in like my very first like 3, 4, 5 hour playing through it. It was just something I genuinely noticed from my other times playing. Now, I was on an XP increase server, and I have noticed, and I did take note, that they had culled some of the extra fatty quests away during their Heaven's Ward is free update. Now, with that, I'm not sure if they had reduced the amount of XP needed, increased XP gains in certain areas, but it was just something I noticed, and you might also have the same experience if you try to play in around 2021 and beyond. And I will say side quests seem more optional, but I will like to advise people that I found side quests to be more helpful during the early levels of the game. Now that I'm kind of getting into the 40s range, I very rarely do the side quests because I'm just kind of focusing on the main narrative. But I will recommend doing a couple of the side quests just to get like 3 free levels basically before you even leave your main area. I'd hinted about this in the previous section on questing, and this is the story. Now, this is where I have dwelled more and managed to get more of my levels, because the main story narrative gives you so much experience. It gives you quite a bit, and especially with rested XP, increased XP gain from having a food item on, and just an XP server increase, it just feels amazing to kind of focus on the main story quest and the main story narrative. As for the actual execution of it, I'll say that some parts have really good voice act. I mean, I don't want to say really good, but they have voice acting, while others, and in the majority of times, they don't. So you'll get small snippets of decent voice acting, but most of the time I've noticed that you're going to have to read and pay attention. But I will say it's a pretty decent setup. It introduces you to your region. It introduces you to certain orders and companies that you might have to pledge your allegiance to. It sets up a couple, smaller enemies, and then kind of hints ever so slightly at the bigger enemies, somewhat in your like level 10 to 20 story range. But it's pretty fine until you get to the picking of your companies. But then once you join your company, it's kind of when it all starts to pick up just a little bit more. Now for my final point about the dungeons. I myself am a PvE dungeon raid type person. I love cooperative work where you fight to complete one goal, so dungeons are my go-to. And I'm happy to report that the dungeons of Final Fantasy XIV are strongly connected to your progress in the main story. So as you continue to do your story quests, you will unlock more dungeons. However, it's not necessarily level-based and tied to your levels. So if you kind of skip ahead a lot in terms of levels and you're not doing your main story quests, you might not have too many dungeons at your disposal. And I gotta say that they're a decent length in terms of the earlier dungeons. They aren't super challenging if you are just paying half attention, I guess. But if you really just focus on damaging as a healer and you just don't even toss a heal, it can get a little sticky sometimes. I will also say it's decent level scaling technology, as if you're like level 38 and you get like a level 10 dungeon, you'll be scaled down to level 10. Now this means that you won't be able to use certain skills that are out of that level range, and some skills will be reverted to lower power tiers. So just keep that in mind. But as a whole, it's fine. But you know, I'm excited to get to higher level dungeons, so I have my full toolkit at my disposal. But as a whole, as a healer, I'm really enjoying it. You know, I'm having a lot of fun, and I'm excited to get to the bigger trials and raids. I must say, Final Fantasy XIV has really impressed me, despite it being my third time coming around to it. For those of you who may be like me, the moment that you play Final Fantasy XIV may just be the wrong time for you. People's perspectives on games change all the time, and they are constantly evolving, as you yourself are constantly evolving. If you've not tried out Final Fantasy XIV at all, or for some time, I would highly recommend jumping in this time around to see if the changes to the game and the community suck you in. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching this little third impressions Final Fantasy XIV video in 2021. I'm really enjoying it. I think it's a great opportunity for people to jump in, considering it's free and the Heavensward expansion is free all the way up to level 60. I think that's a wonderfully marketable aspect to Final Fantasy XIV. So yeah, I'd love to see you in game. Subscribe for more videos, like the video if you liked it. If you'd like to help support the channel on Patreon and get early access to my videos, request videos, and get exclusive game time with me, you know, check it out down below. But, you know, I stream on Twitch, all this stuff. You guys know what to do. I trust you. But, you know, I hope you guys stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye, everyone.